Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest Service Department News webinar. Today, we are going to be looking at some new brands in the extended stay sector. My name's George Sell. I'm Editor-in-Chief at International Hospitality Media, and we are a publisher of online B2B news sites for various aspects of the hospitality industry, and we're also an events and awards organizer. So today's webinar is going to last an hour. We're going to have around 45-minute panel discussion, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. We'd like the session to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please submit them using the chat or the Q&A functions in Zoom. A recording of the session will be sent to everybody who is registered via email in the next couple of days. So this Service Department News webinar series is sponsored by IMS, and we're just going to watch a quick video to find out some more about them. So thanks to IMS, and if you'd like to find out more about IMS and their services, you can see their contact details in the chat. So have a look at them after the session. So I just wanted to show a couple of slides for context quickly, just detailing the fact that although the last couple of years have been extremely difficult for the sector, unprecedentedly so, that hasn't stopped quite a few companies launching new brands. Obviously, we're going to talk more about some of them in detail today, but there are a couple of slides here where you can see some of the new brands that have come into the space. Quite a few in Europe, but also quite a few in Asia, and also in the extended stay hotel sector in America, which has performed incredibly well over the last 18 months. So we've got a fantastic international panel here. I'm going to ask the guys to all introduce themselves quickly, and then we'll go on and talk about why they've launched new brands, what the experience has been like, and what they would have done differently if they got the chance to do it again. Dean, good morning, I believe it is to you. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, George, and thanks for having me on today. Yes, my name's Dean Schreiber. I'm the CEO of Oakwood. We're a hospitality player in the service department and hotel space. I'm based typically in Singapore, particularly during this pandemic, but have offices both in London and the US. Yeah, and as I said, very happy to be with you today.
Thanks, Dean. And Stephen, welcome to you.
Hi, everyone. Stephen Haag, Managing Director for Cove, which is part of the Heaton Group, formerly of the US, but have been living in Europe for 15 years now. I used to be with, I was a solicitor to begin my career, then a management consultant with Bain, and most recently was running UK and Ireland for Sonder out of San Francisco.
Thanks, Stephen. And finally, Naomi, welcome to you.
Hello, George. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on this panel and with these great panelists. I'm Naomi Heaton. I'm chairman of a company, London Central Portfolio, which specialises in the long stay sector in prime central London. And from my experience in that sector, I've become founder and co-owner of The Other House. The Other House is a JV between my company LCP and APG, the Dutch pension fund, where we're looking to bring in a new hospitality concept into the market. Just for interest, prior to that, I was director of a number of advertising agencies, including Saatchi and Saatchi.
Thank you. And let's stay with you for the minute. So tell us a bit more about The Other House, the brand and the concept behind it.
Well, as I said to you, it really came from my experience in the private rented sector in prime central London, where I could see what people wanted was changing over time. So people were moving into actually smaller properties, smaller units, because they wanted to be central. They wanted to have the experiences of central London when they were here as international travellers. So they were prioritising location over space. Subsequently, we saw people wanting more and more of aspirational interiors, better designed interiors, more of a lifestyle, which becomes increasingly important. And ultimately, we saw people wanting services 24/7. And we were seeing the growth of the digital generation who wanted things immediately, and they want to be able to control the things they had. So what we realized, in fact, is that we were almost renting a bunch of hotel rooms. So the original thought was, well, if that's what they want, why don't we provide them with the apartment style living with hotel style facilities? And as we looked at the hospitality market, we could see that at the private rented sector end, you had a great sense of place, but you didn't have much service. At the hotel end, you had potentially great service, more service than you wanted, but not much placemaking. And obviously in the middle, you have this growing sector of service apartments, but still probably light on facilities and concierge and so forth. So our intention is to mash it all together and provide the sense of place with access to hotel style services on demand, and to create a fantastic experience for our guests, whether they're here for a day, a week, a month or a year. So it's complete flexibility with apartment style living. And that really is the concept which we've labeled a residence club. And it really, the best way to describe it is hotel meets private members club. And it will be stylish, intriguing, unique, very experiential, and also actually very committed to sustainability, which we can talk about later on. Very much that this is your other home, your other house, and hence the name, The Other House.
Mm-hmm. And you've launched with 2 properties in London, and are you focusing primarily on London to start with?
We're initially focusing on London, and that's because our expertise has always been prime central London, so we know the market inside out. And as you know, we bought 2 fabulous assets so far. One is in South Kensington in Harrington Gardens, the other is a wonderful site in Covent Garden. And those are almost our outposts of where we want to be. And what we're currently doing and actively searching are for maybe 4 more assets to fill in the gaps, so that we Notting Hill or Fitzrovia or Sloane Square. And once we've done that, we will be rolling out internationally, New York, Singapore, Dubai, European capitals. This is very much an international brand which seeks to merge the hotels with the service departments with the resi sector in one offering, because the people using these products are the same people at different points in their lifestyle, and actually what they want is very much the same service and offering.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Naomi. Stephen, tell us about your new brand, Cove.
Yeah, so we've been, as a stable brand, Eden, we've been active in service apartments for well over 20 years through our Seiko brand. And we saw clear trends before the pandemic of 1, more leisure travel just in general, 2, more people when they do travel are traveling together as part of a group or a family, oftentimes from key outbound markets like APAC and the Middle East. And third big trend was that when these people travel, they travel together, and they travel for longer stays as well. And if you take all those 3 things together, more leisure travelers, more group stroke families, and more people traveling for longer, it really means that you need more space when you travel. The typical hotel room no longer does what you need it to do. So for us, we had a brand already in what we call the apart hotel part of the spectrum, which is kind of closer to a hotel. That's LOC, activated public spaces, and rooms that are slightly larger than a hotel room with a kitchen in them. But what we really wanted to do was take our Seiko brand and the lessons that we've learned over 20 years from that and rebuild it in a way that would be more appealing to a leisure traveler, that would still provide people with the space that they need to live their life in all of its modes, whether it be work, play, or sleep, all of which are occurring within the same space these days. So for us, Cove was the kind of culmination of that, a real sanctuary and a harbor for people from the outside world together with their loved ones. And so for us, it was a logical one that the pandemic really accelerated and said, this is a space we already know really well. Let's go and adjust our existing brands, come up with Cove, and launch that into the market. So we've launched just this year, and already we've transformed 8 of our existing properties. We have another one to come in Amsterdam. We've signed a number of properties out in the market, launched our first new Cove in Liverpool, and we have our existing, our newest Cove that's launched this week. The landmark Pinnacle building in Canary Wharf, 162 units, and the tallest residential building in Europe. So that's just this week that we've launched that, a real flagship product for us, and more to come both on the continent and here in the UK in 2022 as well.
And do you think having this brand opens more doors to you in terms of potential new sites than if you were just looking to operate unbranded service departments?
Yeah, I think it does. I think, Cove is very much a flexible brand, right? The key requirement for us is that extra element of space. That's really what we do. And we're also clear on what we don't do. We don't do food and beverage. That's something that we're leaving to others who are experts in this. And I think, with the advent of obviously all the delivery technology that's out there these days, fewer people need a restaurant within their hotel or apart hotel space. So, I think for us, having a soft brand in Cove opens those doors, opens those growth opportunities for the real estate side of the business as well.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Dean, I've saved you till last because if I'm managing to keep up, you've launched not 1 but 3 brands over the pandemic, and they're all quite different, and they're all, I guess you could say, they're all expanding and broadening your offer away from just a traditional service department.
That's very true, George. And I think, well, just before I even launch into those 3 brands, I think just the fact that, you hear Stephen and Naomi talk about the success of their business and the success of this particular segment in the industry, it just goes to show how resilient the service department brand is. And I think, while our hotel cousins are all closing properties and we were all opening them, I think that just we really are shifting from that alternative stay that you and I have talked about so often, George, into that mainstream accommodation. And I think that's really comforting. I think it's comforting for customers and it's comforting for developers as well, of course. We looked, as you know, Oakwood has been around for many years. We say we're a young company with a long history. We've always played in this space, but in the past we provided an accommodation solution for the corporate housing market and used third-party suppliers to fill accommodation needs, right? So Oakwood, just before COVID started, shifted our focus completely on exiting from that corporate housing solutions provider, working with third-party supply chain, and focusing just on managing our own properties, so that we could really give what Naomi was talking about, that end-to-end solution, making sure that we control the living space, we control the arrival experience, we control the services, and particularly during COVID, making sure that we were in control of the hygiene and the sanitation, and all of the things that are important to customers these days. We launched 3 brands. We launched Oakwood Belux, which is exclusively for the China market, as that's such a strong domestic travel market. We partnered with Country Garden, one of the biggest developers over in China, to launch an exclusive brand for them, that really to cater to that, the more affluent, the more travel savvy domestic customer that needs to be, have the sanctuary of a brand behind them. So, but Country Garden saw the need to want to tap into a major brand, and so they did that deal with us. We also took COVID as the opportunity to look at all of those independent, really very established properties, but didn't want to give up their independence as an operator. They own their own property. They've established themselves in some cases iconically in the market, and so, but they also felt the need to tap into a major brand and find sanctuary in that, because they just couldn't go it alone during COVID. There just wasn't enough, obviously, business flowing through the door. So we created the Unlimited Collection by Oakwood, which allows the owner to keep their independence, but tap into all of the resources that we have. And we've launched that very successfully. And a lot of hotel owners have come to us and said, why were you open when we were closing your properties? How did you do it? What's the secret sauce? So we've created this vehicle for them. So very successful as well, seeing that globally. And just this week, coincidentally, we launched Oakwood Living in the US, which is our multifamily brand. It's multifamily being predominantly unfurnished assets. But we provide, again, Naomi put it so wonderfully, we provide that level of hospitality in even an unfurnished environment. So the guests really do have a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of living like a local, still having no furniture other than their own, but having our hospitality services provide them everything that they need. So it's been a really productive COVID period for us.
I'd like to talk about timelines, because obviously a lot of industries have slowed down dramatically or even had to close. But Stephen, you talked about the pandemic almost as accelerating certain elements of this industry. So did your launch of Cove go to your pre-existing schedule, or did you speed things up to take advantage of the opportunity?
I think it really, it made it clear that this was the right thing to do and that we were doing it at the right time. It kind of was on our timeline. I think, you know, we were also looking at the potential that there could be significant distress in the market that really hasn't come to fruition from a real estate perspective. But it did, from a broader kind of commercial perspective, make sense that we were doing the legwork up front while everybody else was kind of spinning their wheels, especially in the hotel world, that we were putting in the hard yards on creating the brand and doing everything that we could to be ready as soon as the real estate world was opened again, to start signing deals, doing deals as quickly as humanly possible. So we used the pandemic as a chance to build the brand and build the kind of core set of skills that we needed within the team to then really go out and launch, so that when, you know, the kind of market started to open up, we were ready there for the real estate side of it. The reality was, during the pandemic, we maintained 70% occupancy throughout 2020. We continued to trade very well throughout. So it's never like we've been shut, but we did use the time when the real estate market was a little bit cold to go and do all these things that allowed us to, you know, now here in 2021, really get a head start on things.
Thanks, Stephen. Naomi, Stephen and Dean have both launched additional brands to already quite large hospitality operations, whereas the other house, you could say, was starting from scratch. So did you get cold feet at any point and think maybe we need to park this until after the pandemic, or was it always going to be full steam ahead?
Never any cold feet, and always full steam ahead. That's not to say that we haven't been affected by the pandemic, because obviously we had, on the one side, the fortune of not looking to open until 2022, spring, summer 2022. So we had time on our side to kind of weather this storm. But clearly, from a construction point of view, and we are looking at very significant construction, both in South Kensington and Covent Garden. Clearly, workforces have been impacted due to the fact that there have been COVID restrictions or health and safety restrictions. And more recently, the cost of materials and the cost of labour has accelerated enormously. So COVID, in that respect, has had an impact on what we're doing and the cost of what we're doing, but we've been able to manage that. The other element, though, I would say, which was very much reflects what Dean and Stephen is saying, is that if anything, the pandemic has made our proposition, which we had been working on actually since 2012, this is not a new concept, had really enhanced the relevance, both in the fact that we are seeing more slow travel, that people want to have more time to work and then maybe to have vacation, that corporates are going to be more socially responsible in terms of the length of the business trips that they send their employees over, that they will be longer and maybe less frequent. And also, of course, through the pandemic, people moving out of central London and then needing a pied-à-terre. So the whole concept of ours relating to flexibility and having apartment-style living with facilities and amenities on site has become even more relevant. And the other element of it, which no doubt we'll talk about in more detail later, is a tech side of what we're doing. We were always going to be a tech-based brand in the fact that for those who are digitally native and like to live in that way, they can control everything via an app, whether it be check-in, opening their room, ordering their laundry, ordering their food and drink, seeing how busy different places are, whether it be the gym or the spa or the bar or the restaurant. And of course, that ability to be in control and have less touch points from a tech point of view has become so relevant, and that people who indeed might not have ever thought about downloading a QR code to look at a menu or order their food has now become every day. So the concepts that we had have really played into what I see as a post-COVID environment. So although it has had its drawbacks, I think it's also enhanced and made even more relevant a concept that we had, which might have been very ahead of its times, but now I see it as being a child of its time. So in that respect, I think the pandemic has worked for us, plus the fact, as Dean and Stephen say, that longer stay is just more relevant. And over the last 18 months, the service department sector has weathered the storm so much better for all the reasons that I've mentioned than their hotel counterparts. So good things as well as bad things for us. Yeah,
thank you. Dean, it sounds like one of your brands might have actually been a response to the pandemic. How has your launch timeline been affected by COVID?
Well, I think, look, it's really tricky. I could go back to 2019 when it was just, or the end of 2019, and think where we were. Did we really change our timelines? I don't think so. I think what was necessary, particularly with the unlimited collection by Oakwood, we did need to speed that up a little bit, because the owners wanted to reopen some of their properties quickly, and as they saw the VTL lanes open and business happening, it was a bit of a stop-start nature right through the last 18 months, right? But I think the unlimited collection by Oakwood was certainly one we probably brought forward a little bit. But other than that, we were already planning some of these moves as a result of just where we were going as an organization. But yeah, I think we certainly have learned a lot over the last 18 months and what we needed to do and quickly change and address.
Yeah. All your companies are in slightly different positions when it comes to ownership and investment and so on. But have your conversations with either your owning company or your investors or building owners, have they kind of chimed with your determination to press on? So Stephen, for example, Brookfield, I'm sure are pretty anxious to get going with Cove and also to roll out Lock. So there hasn't been any thought of slowing things down coming from the top.
I mean, I think if you look at our track record in 2021 already, we've probably done as many real estate acquisition deals as anyone. And there's also some asset-light leasing deals on top of that. So I think it's a good signifier of kind of the intent. I think a lot of funds in particular raised a ton of money over the last 12-18 months to go out and buy distressed hospitality. And given the fact that we haven't really seen that blood in the water, those funds have largely been sidelined. And that actually is where funds like Brookfield really kind of come into their own. They're long-term investors really looking for quality real estate. And if you can get that at a little bit of a discount to say 2019 levels, then you're away. And really that's been an opportunity for us to go out and buy some really key assets across our brands, but in particular for Cove. And to look at other opportunities. I think when we talk to developers kind of coming outside the Brookfield sphere, it's still relative to that. And we talk to people who, may be building buildings that we could take on a lease or similar. They're really interested in cap rate compression for service departments. And it's something that I think everyone in the industry needs to keep banging on about on every one of these sessions so that everybody kind of takes this into consideration, right? It's crazy to see where cap rates have been for service departments historically, given the resilience that we've shown through the pandemic, through the worst of crises. We can act like resi, we can act like hotels in the best of times. We can really do it all. I think Naomi's got, a product that does do it all in one, but, the rest of us maybe have products that can swing each way, right? And what that should mean for cap rates over the next few years as this becomes mainstream, as it's been said, I think that will make all these developments much more buildable and much more tradable. And I think that'll be good news for anyone who's playing in this space.
Yeah. And Naomi, you've partnered with APG, which is a pension fund who are traditionally fairly conservative long-term investors. But were they keen to press on through all this? And are they even looking to speed up the pace of things now they've seen perhaps the potential opportunity?
Yeah, they've been completely committed to the whole concept ever since we first discussed it with them. They really like the concept of blurring the lines between hotels and service departments and long stay residential. They are big investors in hotels, service departments, apart hotels, and they really recognise the value of the longer stay accommodation, and they are very, very committed to developing that sector. So they have in no way re-looked at their decision, and I think with Dean and Stephen's comments, we can see why that would be. They've seen a really robust occupancy in ADRs in their longer stay accommodation. They see it as a proposition for the future, and you're right, they want to speed up now. We've got the first 2 assets, but we are actively looking to acquire more, and that is a direct mandate that we should. And again, it's really looking for those opportunities in the marketplace, which currently are fairly few and far between. And of course, we're talking about prime central London. We have to operate on a certain minimum level of key, so we have a size of asset we need to acquire. But we're leaving no stone unturned, and anyone who might be listening to this, if they have any ideas, do let us know, because we are really actively looking to develop the brand. And for us, it's very important, because we are a new brand, that we need more assets to develop a brand. We're never going to be able to develop a brand with just 2 assets. So that communication of what we are, and that ultimately we're going to be global, is very, very important. So we're actively looking.
I get the impression that in a lot of places, but particularly in central London, not only has the anticipated distress not arrived, but there's so much capital looking for a home that it's actually a really competitive and hot market at the moment. So,
yes,
so finding the sites is probably your biggest challenge, is it?
Yes, I mean, it's a very competitive market. There is a lot of capital out there, and there aren't a lot of things that ever come up. I mean, the reason we like prime central London is actually the scarcity of stock, whereas if we move more citywards, the ability to build or to obtain stock becomes that much easier. Also, we like to work with refurbished buildings, which is in part due to our sustainable footprint that we want to develop, but also because we like the heritage buildings, because they're unique, they have character, they have personality, and therefore by doing a cut and carve, by refurbishing, renovating those, we have again something which is very unique in our portfolio. That does make it more difficult, but on the other hand, it's not necessarily the kind of asset that other investors, and certainly other investors in the hospitality sector, may be looking to do, where new build may be an easier solution. We like to make things difficult for us and to look for those kind of wonderful heritage assets, which we have both with Covent Garden and with South Kensington. But it is a difficult search, yes.
Yeah. And Dean, Oakwood is owned by Mapletree, and presumably they're every bit as bullish as the companies behind our other 2 panelists' expansion.
Yeah, yeah, they are definitely. I think it's interesting. So Oakwood itself, we're asset light, right? So we don't own any of our properties. But I think Stephen hit the nail on the head. It is about this cap rate compression, and for the first time we're seeing. We always go with our owners to the lenders and explain what the model is, right? And it's exactly what Stephen said. It's just been a bit tricky over the last prior to COVID. But now the lenders are going, okay, now we start to get this, and we see where that resilience. Mapletree's certainly bullish, looking at assets. We have a lot of owners. It depends on the geography, of course. A lot of owners that have taken this opportunity to buy more assets, might buy more properties. Some have obviously been a little bit stretched, not being able to do that. But it's kind of a bit of a seesaw, actually. Some are doing really well in terms of picking up assets, and others, as Naomi said, just cannot find them, right? They want to buy, but they just can't find anything right now. So it's been a very interesting dynamic, and it's going to be interesting how this plays out. We all talk about the end of COVID, and I just wish we had a crystal ball to see how this is going to how this is really going to work, and who's buying what and who's going to transact, and where we see those cap rates get down to.
Are you seeing any of your owners convert existing hotel inventory to more of an extended stay product?
Definitely. Most of those owners I mentioned before under the Unlimited collection looked at what they could do to address the long stay market, or have at least the flexibility to go long stay, short stay, where using interconnecting rooms and putting kitchenettes in one room and keeping the other room as a hotel room. So we've seen a lot of conversion, a lot of owners swapping inventory around. I think the beauty about design and these days is you can do that sort of thing. If you've got some rooms and you're flexible, you're going to be able to shift. And we've always positioned ourselves as being 60 to 70% long stay, 30 to 40% short stay. And so when we're talking to owners about what they should do with their asset, their capital improvement plan, we kind of stick to that logic or that strategy of if they can make the inventory fit into those percentages. It's working very well for us and working well for them, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. There's been a lot of talk about how travel habits are changing. Obviously, people are tending to stay longer. They're becoming more switched on to apartment offers when they might have stayed in a hotel. Stephen, do you think your customer demographic has changed since you first conceptualized Cove, and if so, how?
Well, I mean, Cove was really a brand in response to a changing customer demographic that we saw, right? So we had Seiko, which was a kind of traditional service and apartment provider, really targeting corporate, medium to long stay guests. And what we saw was we could still target those exact same people, but do it with a nicer, softer brand that also was great for leisure travelers. Why wouldn't a corporate consultant traveling for a project for the next month want to stay in a well-designed, beautiful apartment? We were excluding that. We were excluding our leisure guests for no particular reason. So that was actually one of the main reasons why we decided to launch Cove. Was to target both sides of the tree. Now, I think what we've seen, obviously, we talk a lot about digital nomads and all that side of things, but really it's that blurring between business and leisure, this pleasure thing going on, where I think really extended stay comes into its own. And I think we just all need to be careful by saying, okay, business travel is in decline or whatnot. I think business travel as we know it or as we knew it is in decline, but I don't think it's the same thing. Really interesting stuff coming out of Delta Airlines in the US, talking about why its load factor in business class and first class has really gone up despite the decline in business bookings. And a lot of it, in their view, is actually people who are traveling on business. But it's not through the big corporate accounts like it used to be. It's on an individual who's traveling for their own business, for their own purpose, but it is still business. It's just not on the business Amex like it used to be. And so I think there's going to be a lot of that where the whole notion of what it means to be a business traveler is changing. It doesn't mean it's going away. It just means it's different. But at the same time, we do need to be cognizant that we have this leisure guest there too. And that's really what the brand's meant to be. It's meant to be there for both. Why not be there for a business traveler and a leisure traveler at the exact same time, which is something that corporate service apartments historically weren't. They were very bland, gray, and boring. And we're trying to be just that little bit more exciting.
And in opening up to these leisure travelers, have you had to change your minimum length of stay?
No, we've always been, short length of stay all the way through to medium and extended stay. We think there's a sweet spot. We've done a lot of analysis to kind of figure out what that is. But, we continue to take one night stays and continue to take up to a year, whatever. Doesn't really matter. We'll find a way to make it work, within relevant planning restrictions and all of that. But, again, we think that, while we have a profile that we want to hit in terms of length of stay, we always know it's a little bit of everything. And so I think Dean was making the point that it's, a mix for him on extended stay, and it's skewed towards extended stay. Fair enough. I think one of the questions that we could all ask ourselves is, what is the definition of extended stay? Right? Where do we draw the line on that? Is there a medium stay category? All that. So, all interesting things that have come out of the pandemic, kind of pressure points to get into. But it's all exciting. It's all upside for the industry. The more and more data it gets on this, the more and more it figures out how to run profitable businesses with this kind of model.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Naomi, you mentioned that you first started thinking about this brand back in 2012. So it's been nearly a 10-year journey, and it will be 10 years, I guess, by the time you open your first property. Do you think the people who check in to your first property when you open it, will they look like the people that you envisaged back in 2012, or has it changed a lot along the way?
No, I think that they will be the same people. As I say, accelerated maybe because of COVID and how we've all changed our behaviour. But we were always targeting a type of person. It was never a specific demographic. I mean, in terms of sector, we had always thought approximately 50% leisure, 50% corporate. That hasn't changed. We'd seen a split between maybe 45% very transient, 25% the medium stay, i.e. the up to 3 month stay, and then 20% for the very long stay up to a year plus. And none of that has changed in our model. We feel that the kind of people that we're targeting are aspirational. They know where they're going, they have goals and objectives, they're going to be very successful in their lives. They may not have reached the top of the tree yet, but they have a very clear vision of how they want to be and also how they want to run their life. And as I mentioned to you, social, environmental impact is going to be very important to them. And of course, that has accelerated so far on the environmental agenda, has accelerated faster than we possibly could imagine. So we're right there then. So I think that the kind of person who's also wants a sense of place, wants to be in control, wants to have great experiences, and wants to be green, all of those characteristics which we had defined a decade ago still remain exactly right and more accentuated. And as I said to you, the app, we are 10 years more digital than we were when we started thinking about this, the ability to get services on demand. And our desire to digitalize is really in order to be able to also to personalize. The more things that you can, the more mundane transactions you can do via an app, the more we can make our personal service stand out. And the other thing that we were always aiming to do was to have our club flats where people could enjoy their private space, but we also wanted to have this private members club where they can mix if they want to, but they have bars and they have a gym and they have a spa, and that's just for them. But we also wanted to have this public area, this food and beverage area, which is in our model, which obviously is not necessarily in the Cove model, but is very much part of our model, that you can have the street vibe, you can have the kind of private club vibe, or you can have your own personal space. Having said that, it was always going to be at a certain level, because we also recognize that people will go out and have experiences. They'll go to restaurants, they will go to bars, they will bring takeaways in. We know they will, so we help facilitate that rather than to try and prevent it. We understand all these trends in people's lives. So I would say that because we had a kind of type of person, a type of psychological profile that we were looking at, that has very much remained on track. And we haven't tweaked our model in terms of what it will be compared with what we had originally thought about.
Interesting, thank you. Dean, by branching out into multifamily and hotel properties and so on, are you having to appeal to new target demographics and reach new travellers, or do you think you're reaching the same people but just at a different stage of their lives, or when they're travelling for different purposes? How do you think that's going to work?
Well, I think the markets are always changing, even pre-COVID. I think apart from the fact that the short stay is getting longer and the long stay is getting shorter as a result of COVID, I think that the market was always moving in this direction anyway. The demographics were, you needed to cater to different demographics. There was never a one size fits all that with sort of the hotel industry almost adopted. So we were already on this trajectory, and I think people were already starting to experience serviced apartments and the serviced apartment product pre-COVID. And once they did experience that, we've always seen that people go, well, I never knew that a service department could provide that sort of level of service and those sort of hospitality facilities. So we were seeing a big growth anyway. I think with COVID, I don't even know if behaviors have really changed. I just look at myself now, just traveling. I'm in the US traveling at the moment. And I was conscious about, was I looking for anything different when I checked in or when I stayed in a property, particularly on our own. And I know I always laugh when people say, well, the guests now expect the rooms to be clean and cleaner. Well, I know we were keeping our rooms clean. So I think the behavior hasn't really shifted because of COVID. I think the behavior is shifted because travel has shifted. Naomi mentioned earlier before that people want instantaneous gratification in terms of instant confirmation, instant food delivery. That's probably the one area that has changed, is that food delivery concept. Getting the sophistication of the delivery service that Stephen mentioned earlier. That's amazing. But I think we just continue to look at the market shifts, the demographics, what a customer wants at different price points, what we can deliver at those different price points, and we have developed products to cater to all of those shifts in demand. But I don't think it's COVID related necessarily. Other than that, like I said earlier, I think people, the shorter stays are going to get longer because the airfares are so high, and might as well stay in the city or the country a little bit longer, particularly if the quarantine still happens in some locations. And those longer stays where people are relocating the whole family, I think that's getting shorter, and people are being sent over or moving around globally on more project basis. So that's what we're catering to.
Thanks, Dean. I'd like to talk a bit about brand affinity and brand loyalty. Now, the major hotel companies launch brands on an incredibly frequent basis. It has slowed down over the pandemic, but they're still going. And if you look at the top 5 hotel companies between them, the number of brands they've got is incredible. I work in hospitality media, and I couldn't really remember all of them or tell you what they stood for or what their brand values are, which makes me fairly certain that the people who stay in them couldn't either. But does extended stay present a better opportunity to develop brand loyalty and brand affinity because your guests, A, are with you for longer, and B, I think the fact that they are going to be staying for longer means perhaps they do a bit more research than they would. It's not just based on price like it might be for a shorter stay. Stephen, do you want to kick off with your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this is a tough one, right? I think, to start with, you go back and you look historically at what service departments have meant, and it was in that sense, it's easier to develop brand affinity because you are having people stay for longer. And to be frank, the barriers to entry were quite high from a corporate booking perspective, right? So those agents and when corporate bookers within larger companies were looking to book with you, they had very high duty of care requirements on each of the providers. And so that was kind of your first bit. And so there was a kind of unnatural barrier that sat there. I think that's come down a bit, and I think realistically, with the kind of transition that I mentioned before about more people traveling for work as individuals rather than as part of huge corporates, I think that those kind of people will be happy to stay at an Airbnb, or in an ideal world, it's something that has a little bit more consistency to it. Like the kind of brands that we're talking about here. So, I think that affinity is potentially, in jeopardy. Now, what can we do to kind of combat that? Number one of the reasons why hotels have all of these brands is that there's loyalty schemes that sit behind them. And I would hazard to say none of us on this call or elsewhere in the service department of Park Hotel world have a really truly robust loyalty scheme that when business travelers in particular go and travel, they're excited about getting points at Cove because we don't have points. So I think that's the real opportunity to build brand affinity, and if that can be implemented either from a pure service apartment, apart hotel play, or from a major service apartment, apart hotel player becoming part of a bigger loyalty program in some way, shape, or form. I think that's where things can kind of get interesting from an affinity standpoint, because of all of the other reasons that you mentioned in terms of length of stay and everything else. But it's really tricky. It's a fine balance, and we'll have to see kind of how it plays out over the next few years.
It's interesting that a lot of service departments traditionally have been unbranded, or the brand has been a long way back. It certainly hasn't been front and center. And maybe the launch of all these very recognizable apart hotel brands like Lock and Wild and so on is the kind of that's the spearhead for a greater emphasis on brand throughout the rest of the industry. Naomi, you've obviously got an extra layer with the members club, so you're presumably looking for a real long-term and extended relationship with your customers.
Yes, well, we're of course looking for long-term extended relationship with all those who are staying with us for the medium or the very, very long term. And clearly, as a club in which all our residents are members while they stay with us, they have complete access to the club as long as they stay with us. We will also have external private members who will pay a subscription. And obviously, as we grow, our club will be available to our residents and our members around the world. So that, of course, is an area where we will be developing long-term relationships. But the brand is so much more than that. I mean, the brand creates a whole layer of values over the service and product that you provide. And clearly, the services and the product and the delivery are all absolutely vital to create an affinity with your consumer and to ensure that your user comes back again and again. And obviously to ensure that you can attract the corporate bookers and you have the standards and the systems that they need to make their life very, very simple. But branding is much more than that. And it's a creation of a brand that people aspire to and people relate to, that has the values that they want, which are really, really important. And in the hotel industry, of course, there are so many so-called brands, but actually they don't have much of brand identity. It's almost clusters of hotels operating under a certain name, but the differentiation between all those brands becomes very, very difficult to understand or perceive. What you were mentioning about developing brands in the service department sector, to some extent, I think it's easier because there are far fewer of them. And as you rightly say, it wasn't even a branded sector. But when imagery, experience, status, style are all so important in what a consumer or a guest is using to base their decision on, you need to know exactly what you are. And we know what our product offering is, but we also want to be cool, intriguing, sustainable. We want to be for people in the know, this really great place with this really great vibe that you have to find out about, and it doesn't cost a fortune. So it's developing all your brand values and understanding how you want to communicate, how you want to position yourself, how you want to talk to your users. All of that is going to be as important as the actual product delivery, so that you can create a really differentiated voice in the marketplace. And I think with these new disruptor products, there is much more ability to do that in a really meaningful kind of way.
The experiential piece is quite interesting. I mean, traditional service departments haven't really offered a great deal in that department. It's been somewhere safe and clean and warm to stay, essentially. So will your members club offer, will you partner with other businesses in the neighborhoods and offer other experiences and that kind of thing?
We want to partner with businesses in the neighbourhood in all sorts of kind of ways, and people and movers and shakers in the neighbourhood. We very much want to develop links with the community wherever we are, so that we can create interesting and relevant stories around where we are, but also in terms of our ESG policy, that we want to be able to bring our guests out into the local area, and we want to bring the local area into us. So partnerships, obviously some maybe with major brands that share the values and the target market that we do, but also much more local businesses and brands that we can bring in, because we want to support the local community. And I think that's going to be very important. And experience is really, really important. To my mind, it's so much more than providing the apartment, providing the services. Is what else can they get, both within the other house, but also what they can get outside the other house to make this a truly memorable experience.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Naomi. Dean, one of your new ventures is a soft brand. Are we allowed to call it that? How does the balance work between the Oakwood presence and the existing brand of the property that joins.
How do you mean that, George?
Sorry?
What do you mean? How do you?
So the properties retain their brand and their identity,
Right.
but they have Oakwood sitting behind it, and presumably to drive bookings and help with marketing. Sure. And so on. So how visible is Oakwood to the customer, or are you
with the soft brand? Yeah. Okay. Well, I think because it's the unlimited collection by Oakwood, it's almost acts as an endorsement that the product is of a certain standard, of course, that we require. Even though it doesn't have brand standards that are tied to Oakwood, it still needs to be of a standard. It sort of just reinforces that the service is going to be consistent, and we're going to deliver on all of their expectations. We're talking in context with this being loyalty. Again, what is loyalty? Who's loyal these days? I think for us, it's all about the recognition when a customer arrives that they are an Oakwood customer. They've stayed with us before, and now by expanding the portfolio and giving them different options to stay, we hope to retain those guests. And that's why we also think the soft brand is really important for us. It offers a different experience as well. It's very tied to the community. Most of these properties under the unlimited collection. We're branching into resorts as well, so that our customer not only stays with us in what has been traditionally a corporate location, middle of the city, but now they can also go and stay with us in a resort, in a destination property, in a meetings facility. So I think it's important that the brand endorses the product, and the customer is recognized when he stays with the product.
Mm-hmm. The loyalty programs in hotels, it does make you laugh. I think I mentioned the other day, I know some people who have got 8, 10, 12 different hotel loyalty cards in there.
Exactly,
which doesn't make you
tell me you're loyal.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Okay, so you've all successfully launched your new brands. What would you do differently next time? And if there is going to be a next time, when will that be? Stephen, let's kick off with you.
Yeah, I think we've gone very quick, so we're still figuring out what the lessons learned are, right? Hopefully they're all positive, but I think one of the things that if we had years and years and years to research it, and we really wanted to get down into the detail. I think this is true across all of real estate to some extent. It would be great to build a bunch of different model rooms, slightly tweaked in this way, that way, and get people to stay in them and get their feedback, right? To do true consumer research is very difficult in real estate, and almost no one does it. So, if I had all the time in the world, I'd build model rooms at different square footages, get people to stay in them, get their feedback, get them to stay at it in for different lengths of stay, and really try to build the perfect room for the guest. Now, the good news is that given what we've done both with Lock, Seiko, and now with Cove, we're getting through real world experience a lot of those lessons in terms of having different products in different places. So we're learning perhaps the harder way than doing it in a lab. But I think it's one of those where if I had to do it all again and had all the time in the world, that would be the way to do it. I think in terms of are we going to be launching new brands? That's not our intention. We do these things very slowly, very deliberately. We think right now between hotels and apartments, we've got the two brands that are positioned at exactly where we want them in between those two spaces. Could we do hotels? It's not our bag. Plenty of people do hotels. They probably have a lot more experience than we do, so it's not for us. Could we do apartments, BTR, multifamily type stuff? Maybe, but it's not really for us right now. A lot of people talking about co-living, but every co-living player that I've seen has failed. So I think it's for us, we have our two brands. We're in a great spot right now. The market likes where we're at. So let's just dig deep and go big on those two.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Stephen. The crossover between build to rent or multifamily and extended stay is something I find quite interesting, and I think we are going to do a webinar about that actually fairly soon. Dean, can you see a situation where you have both those uses within the same building under your management?
Yep, I think we're open to all sorts of different models. I think that's one thing that we've learned through this whole COVID period is that the more opportunities, the more models you have, the more penetration into the market you can do. We certainly, I think, if I look where, what the takeaway from this, certainly I would never do this again during a COVID and during a worldwide pandemic. I think we've never worked so hard in our lives and just to keep things moving along, ticking along. So having flexibility, diversity in the product, I think is something that we always want to make sure we have.
Yeah. And Naomi, is there anything you would do differently looking back on the other house journey? And have you got any more brand launches up your sleeve?
I don't think we would have done anything differently. I don't think we probably could have done anything differently. But of course, we have learned lots of lessons along the way, which we will bring to bear on the other on the other acquisitions. And of course, we're not just opening a new asset. We are building a brand, we're building our communications, we're developing our brand standards, we're developing our operational standards. So it is a massive task ahead of us, which will become more simple as we acquire more assets and once we've been able to test what we've done and make sure it all works and where we need to tweak. And we will be rolling out that brand to other assets, but we have no intention of opening another brand. This was the concept, this disruptor concept, this blurring the lines concept was what we've always wanted to launch, and we will concentrate solely and totally on making this an international brand. I don't think, or clearly if you have different products which are doing different things, you will want to create different brands, but for us, this is the proposition that we want to bring to market. So it is the one brand, the other house South Kensington, the other house Covent Garden, and ultimately there'll be other houses globally. So no, one brand with lots to do.
Yeah, we're nearly reached the end of our hour. That's absolutely flown by. So I just want to ask you all very quickly in turn where you see your new brands in 3 years' time. So Naomi, do you want to carry on from where you
Well, I suppose I think I probably covered it, and we haven't got much time. We see our brand being significantly represented in prime central London and starting to look across the borders to other parts in the globe. So we see an expansion program.
And Stephen?
Yeah, I think right now our focus is trying to get one building per market to some extent. I think we will continue that internationally over the next 3 years. I think the bit for us that I'm most excited about is starting to go deeper into markets and do more where we can, why not have a Cove on every street corner that there is a Holiday Inn. I see no reason why not. So let's go make it happen.
Wow. Okay. And Dean, I won't make you talk through all 3 brands, but let's talk about Oakwood Living and where you see that 3 years from now.
Well, Oakwood, I think everybody has a right to have a decent stay, no matter what sort of their budget, their market is, right? So we see Oakwood expanding into student housing, assisted living, as I said, resorts, because I think at the end of the day, when you check in, you should have a great experience, and we feel we can provide that no matter what the type of accommodation. Oakwood Living, we see that at the moment rolling out certainly through the US market because it's such a strong product. The multifamily and having that hospitality element to it, but we also see that moving into Asia as I think it has never, the multifamily has never been strong in Asia, and I guess probably in the Middle East as well. So we see it growing globally as well. First, we'll solidify it, we'll stabilize it in the US, and then we'll bring it out globally.
A build to rent is actually at a really interesting stage here in the UK as well. As our long-held attitudes to home ownership are changing as as affordability is becoming really difficult. So
interesting space.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. It's been a really good session. The hour has flown by. I just want to show a couple of quick slides before we go off. we've got a webinar coming up on December the 9th, which is about trends in this sector. And I think the link to register for that will be in the chat. We are hosting, well, we're back to hosting live events. We launched our Urban Living Festival a couple of weeks ago, and Recharge, which is one of my favorite events, is taking place in Paris in January. It's a really interactive, vibrant event. It's limited to 120 attendees. It's a really good mixture of people. We've got some great sponsors there. And again, if you're interested, there's some info in the chat. Do contact my colleague Katie if you're interested in getting involved, sponsoring an event or a webinar. And thanks very much for watching. Thanks to IMS for sponsoring. Thanks to Naomi, to Dean, and to Stephen for their input. It's been a great session. We are going to leave the session open for a couple of minutes just so you can take some notes, because there's an awful lot of info in the chat there. Other than that, I just need to say thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks all.